Sorry to derail the cast, the pod, but 2020 Victoria Beckham, absolutely, she's still banging. Anyway, sorry.
He pulls out a banana and starts eating it, and all the players are like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" And
Ollie's not at the wheel. Yeah. Ollie needs to be in a fucking Uber home, mate.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Midtable Up Podcast. Today we will each be ranking the greatest Premier League players of all time. Yep, we're going there. At the end of this hour, which players will be mid-table, what Premier League greats will qualify for Champions League football, and which Premier League legend will claim the top spot. Arguing with us today is the only West Ham United fan in the world to predict that Spurs would win the league in 2020. Spoiler alert, they didn't. It's Mr. Matthew
close.
Lee.
It was close.
Yeah.
It almost
happened.
What
was it? Only the 30-odd points between
Only
Spurs
30
and
points.
Last season?
Only 30 points. Thank you.
Only 30 points, lads, you know.
Well, the thing is, it wasn't the first time he's done either. This is the second.
And the third time this season, I might be right. Moving on,
well,
though.
a broken clock is
I
right
think
twice a
this
day.
year than you've been before.
I've been close.
Arguing alongside Mr. Matthew Lee is a man who claims that he can't watch the Sunderland Till I Die documentary on Netflix because it hits too close to home. It's our resident tractor boy, Simon Bartlett. How you doing, Simon? You okay?
I'm good, and I think every Ipswich fan feels that pain of.
Fuck, you didn't get.
So you're not alone in Ipswich fans then when you say that you can't watch that documentary.
I'm sure others have watched it more than I have, but it definitely feels a bit.
Got relegated once, man. Not back to back.
Oh.
To League One though, come on.
And your final host is myself, George Ellis, a man who once spent 2 hours waiting for the autographs of Victor Moses and Emmanuel Emenike while they were playing for West Ham. Yep, I have a great life.
That was ours was quite bad, but George, you picked an introduction for yourself that was relatively reasonable.
Do you really think that was a reasonable intro? Because looking back now, I really don't know why I spent 2 hours of my life waiting for the autograph of Emenike and Victor Moses. I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that.
Imagine if you look back in your life and you go, I think it peaked. It's all been downhill from there.
I think the big question, George, is do you still have the signatures?
I do. I got them signed
under his bed. Under his pillow.
Yeah.
Kisses them every night.
Always.
Come on.
No, honestly, I got them on the away shirt for that season, and I've still got some book thing that they're in my wardrobe. So, treasured memories.
In his secret book. In his secret box.
Exactly. Alongside my autographed picture of Emma Watson that I got when I was 10.
Yeah, it's just a bit sticky nowadays. Can I say that? Is that allowed? Oh yeah, fuck it.
Yeah, that's.
It's
fine. It's fine. We are an adult podcast. Well, I say that we've probably come across as very childish, but never mind. So
yeah, we're definitely not.
Who wants to kick things off and start giving us their list of the top 10 greatest players of all time? So of course, we are completely blind. We have absolutely no idea what the other two have said, and it's going to be probably a very heated debate as to who is right and who is wrong. This is the first time that we're going to be hearing each other's lists.
I'll go out strong, and I think I just want to preface this that my list is more contemporary than probably someone else's list may be, and that's only because I've really only been following football in my later years of life. And when I say later, that makes me sound like I'm 80. But
you're about 85.
Yeah, 85. But I've only really been into football since I was kind of 15, 16. So the early years. So my number 10 spot, I've got Eden Hazard.
Oh wow, that's a big shout. That's a big shout.
Big shout that he doesn't make the list, or big shout that he's too low.
I mean, to be fair, spoiler alert, he's not on my list, but that's probably why I think it's a big shout. Obviously, if you were going over the last decade alone, you'd probably have to put Hazard up there for sure. So what made you think that Hazard is the 10th greatest Premier League player of all time?
For me, there were lots of games. So, of course, you know, what he did with Chelsea was amazing. But there were lots of games, let's not buttercoat it, where maybe he wasn't, you know, didn't have such an impact as he had. But there would be one or two games, especially near the later stages of his time at Chelsea, where he would just have a game and he would just be outstanding. Like his goal against West Ham, where he just made our defence look like shit, and that's very easy, but he made it extra. That's very easy. But he made it extra.
Yeah, I was going to say goals against West Ham shouldn't really count for much on this list. I'm just going to throw that out there.
There's so many moments of his, so that's why he makes my number 10.
I think that you're right. It just, Chelsea wouldn't have won those couple of league titles without him. He was winning games on his own, wasn't he? At times, I mean. You just say, give the ball to Hazard, he'd run past half the team, score an absolute worldie, and they'd win the game. He was a bit of a game breaker, wasn't he? He seemed to just have that ability just to beat a man and score great goals.
Absolutely. And I think what I liked most about him was that he just had this very... I'm going to get slated for that. He had this style where at times it looked like he wasn't, like, off the ball, he looked like he wasn't working hard, which to a certain extent is probably true.
He didn't work hard off the ball. That's probably why.
But
not always. Maybe that's being a little bit harsh, but it wasn't. It wasn't what he was known for, obviously.
Exactly.
But you don't need to be when you're that good.
That is true. Fair enough. So, yeah, Eden Hazard, as I said, you know, certainly of the last 10 years, you probably wouldn't be able to make this list without including him, because obviously he was that important. He was also very important for Chelsea's title surges. There's probably no doubting that. The only real question marks for me would be the sort of periods, and obviously we're seeing this now at Real Madrid, how we see his form seems to like disappear sometimes. Like obviously the year Leicester won the league, I think the only goal he scored that season was against Spurs to stop them from winning the league. So, you know, great way to pick your moments there, Eden. But yeah, for me, that, and I always kind of felt with Hazard as well, and I don't know if you guys are the same, but I always kind of wanted him to sort of hit that sort of like 30 goal a season figure, basically. So yeah. I was always super impressed with him. But for me, in the stats never quite got what I thought his ability was capable of getting, especially when you kind of see that the first season that Mohamed Salah had for Liverpool, and the sort of season that Ronaldo had in his last year at Manchester United. I was always just hoping that he would have that kind of season for Chelsea, and though he had very good seasons for Chelsea, he never quite hit that level for me.
I was going to say, I agree with George's point. I mean, you had Chelsea fans saying he's the third best player in the world, didn't you, at periods of his time there. And you never saw those kind of numbers for him to really justify that. Obviously a fantastic player. The other thing that I always would say, the reason why I didn't pick him in my list probably was also the length of time he was here. He was here, what, 5 years?
I think he arrived. He arrived in 2012, just after Chelsea won the Champions League. And when did he leave? 2018, 2019, going into 2020. So to be fair, he was here about 7. Matthew, then number 9. Who is your number 9?
My number 9, again, very contemporary. Mr. De Bruyne, Kevin.
Wow.
I think.
Now he's only made number 9. I'm curious to see.
He's only made number 9. I think for me, he's so good. I watch him before I go to bed every night, and just wish that he could just whack those balls really well.
Whatever gets you off, Matt.
I didn't know where I was going with
whatever
that.
Gets you off.
No, he. For me, I think it's a bit of a bold call because he's only been here for 5 minutes.
So the thing, for me, I think
he's been part of 2 amazing City sides, and really City sides that without him, I'm not going to say they don't win the league, but they definitely aren't as potent.
Well, I think it was either the 100-point year or the season. I think it probably was the year they got 100 points, where actually he probably did miss quite a big chunk of that season. But obviously, I do take your point. You do kind of think if he had been fit all of the time, they might have got even more than 100 points. And obviously, is a big boost for City. Whoever they play against, and to be fair, I get what you mean, because obviously longevity really goes against him right now. Obviously, he's still midway through his career, so it's a bit of a big, bold ranking, I would say, a ninth for Kevin De Bruyne. However, I will say this: I think if you were going on ability alone, so if you maybe removed, like if you were going on ability alone, I would say that Kevin De Bruyne is probably better than at least 5 of the players that I've got on my list. Yeah, probably 5, if not. So if you were going on ability alone, I feel like you would probably have to put Kevin De Bruyne in your top 10. And obviously, in this case, you've put him in 9th, which is fair enough.
Sorry, I think the big thing that I will say about De Bruyne is he's full of a team of superstars, yet still looks a level above everybody else on the pitch every game he plays. Like, I could watch I said this before, when I watch a Man City game, if they just focus the camera on Kevin De Bruyne and just watch him for 90 minutes, I would enjoy watching that. He's so intelligent. His movement is so good.
It's unbelievable. I think for me, the thing that I've always found most impressive is his vision. Some of the passes that he's made, I feel like that when you're watching it on the telly, you couldn't even see that pass. And he's not only got the vision to see it, but then he's able to execute it. I think it's unbelievable. So yeah, I do think that if you're going from an ability perspective, he probably would be in the top 10, but then I would also probably argue that in that case, possibly David Silva could make that as well.
Big, yeah.
But yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, and obviously your list is much more contemporary. So, wow, if number 10 is Hazard and number 9 is Kevin De Bruyne, who is going to be number 8 for you then, Matthew?
It's another contemporary, but I promise it's not. It's only because some of these people they've only been here for not 5 minutes, but they haven't had, it's very easy to judge a player that has kind of had their career and it's over because how the story ends.
Exactly, and it's one of those things where these rankings that you're doing now, they're either going to age like fine wine or they're going to age like milk. It really depends on, how someone like Kevin De Bruyne would finish their career. Number 8.
We're only in the business of aging people terribly, and that follows up with the next guy who I think's fantastic, could be a Premier League winner in 2021, Mr. Harry Kane.
Wow.
And I think part of the reason I put him so high on my list is probably a bit selfish. I don't think he's better than Kevin De Bruyne, because that's just nuts, but what he does for that Spurs team and his range of play is what I think I love so much about him, is that, without Harry Kane, that Spurs team is a different beast. And taking into consideration, and probably this is a bit reason why, without him in that England team's a different beast. He consistently has shown that he's not able to score goals, that he's able to drop off the play and make things happen. And I think it's pretty obvious in games when we see an England team without Harry Kane in it. We can see that there's a complete lack of creativity at times. And we all point at the midfield. And I think the reason why we haven't noticed that earlier is because Harry Kane's always been kind of taking that drop off and letting Sterling and Sancho kind of run in. And then he just does these lovely balls. So yeah, he's my number 8.
I mean,
and he'll win the league. He was supposed to win it the last 2 years. I'm holding that.
I think, to be fair, obviously there's no doubting the caliber of player that Harry Kane currently is, because really it's in terms of out and out strikers right now, it's between him and Lewandowski in terms of who's the best out and out striker. And obviously Harry Kane is already showing that, even later in his career, if need be, he can drop into midfield, because he's passing for a traditional, I want to say number 9, but he's been playing more like a number 10. Is obviously phenomenal. It's just, again, we go back to this kind of, I don't want to keep throwing the longevity argument about it, because, obviously he's still got so much of his career to do. And I do kind of think that if he stays in England for his entire career and avoids, enough injuries, I do think he will break Shearer's Premier League record. But obviously, at the minute, he's still...
That's a big
How far off of it is he?
I mean, he's pretty high up the list.
In his Premier League career so far, looking at, he has scored on all seasons 149 goals.
In the Premier League alone, or is that
in the Premier League alone?
Wow. So yeah, he's 111 off Shearer. So you've got to think that if he gets, say, 20 to 25, over the next 4, 5, 6 years or so, he will break that record quite just easily. But it depends on injuries, obviously.
But then it would depend on his role. If he starts pulling deeper and deeper, he obviously won't hit those numbers.
What's the Shearer record?
260.
260.
Yeah. So as I said, 111 off that at the minute. So he's got a bit of a way to go, obviously. As I said, I do think, I do think that, especially at this stage in his career, considering that Kane, kind of only really burst onto the scene, about 5 years ago now, so at this point, I am surprised that you had him ahead of Eden Hazard in 10th.
Well, no, I'm Eden Hazard I can maybe slightly get. Kevin De Bruyne was a...
Well, even, I think maybe it's because of the longevity, whereas, again, Kevin De Bruyne has only really been in the Premier League for 5 years, and obviously it looks like, unless Hazard ever returns to the Premier League, it kind of looks like his Premier League career is over.
And this isn't a stats merchant, because if we went on stats alone, Harry Kane would be in this list. But there's something I want to bring up is his
stats aren't bad, though, to be fair.
He's only had 217 appearances in the Premier League, and he scored 149 goals.
Yeah, no, that is outrageous.
His goals to get
ratio, that's unbelievable.
Goals per match is 0.69, which is very, very good.
What he's added this year is assists as well. I mean, he's got 8 assists so far, which is crazy. I mean, I think what we're seeing now is he plays like Teddy Sheringham used to play. That's what he does. He knows when to get in the box and score goals, but he also knows when to withdraw and hold the position, because obviously Spurs have that pace all around him. Son, Bale, Moura, people like that. So he knows that there are times that he doesn't need to be in there because he wants them to utilise that space. And he's just clever that he knows when he needs to be in and when he doesn't.
Yeah, cool. So number 7 then, Matthew.
This might be more controversial.
Wow, okay. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I think he deserves a place on this list. I think people would probably say he deserves a higher place on this list.
Right.
Which I could see. But to be fair, I can kind of defend everyone above him. It's Paul Scholes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No. So I mean, to be fair, I would 100% agree with you that Paul Scholes would probably deserve to be a little bit higher on the list. But then I also think, depending on whether you're gonna put Lampard or Gerrard ahead of him. That's another debate, of course. But yeah, fair enough. Paul Scholes, even at number 7, I've got no qualms with. I've got no qualms with Paul Scholes, none at all.
Yeah.
What about you, Simon?
I have no issue with that. I mean, you come back to the Gerrard Lampard Scholes debate. I mean, I'm sure we'll cover that again as we go through some of our other lists. But yeah, Scholes is one of the finest midfielders that I've seen. We probably caught the back end,
kind of, but it was so really, obviously this is the first one where longevity really comes into play, because we probably just missed his peak in terms of us growing up, but obviously even I remember watching him when he was probably still around like early 30s and still just being blown away as to how much he dictated the game. And to this day, I still think that...
The thing I would say with Scholes is that would he fit into this Manchester United's team?
Oh, for me, you build the team around him. Like, for me, you
absolutely.
For me, like 100%. Like, he would be the first name on the team sheet for me, and then everyone else goes around him.
Yeah, and you drop fucking Mr. Pogba. And you drop.
Well, can't even get into the team at the minute.
Today they had Fred and McTominay. I mean, come on, you're telling me Paul Scholes isn't getting in ahead of
Yeah, but they kind of do. Oh, Fred, fuck me. Oh, God, could you imagine?
So yeah, here's the I've got the Manchester United 2011 Champions League final team, and in the midfield they started Park on the left, Giggs on the inside. I don't know whether this image has got the formation wrong, because you would think that Giggs would be better suited to the wing. Carrick and Valencia. And for me personally, it would have been difficult. I know Scholes was getting older by then, but for me...
Was he injured?
No, I think he was on the bench. But for me, coming up against Xavi and Iniesta, I just think they were never obviously going to have more of the ball. And I just think that if you started Scholes in that game, when you did get the ball, I feel like he would have helped you retain it better, and also been more capable of opening up the opposition than Giggs and Carrick in midfield. Obviously Giggs at this point was pushing 40 almost. So, obviously Scholes wasn't too much younger, but personally, I would have started Scholes and had 2 players around me. But it's only Sir Alex Ferguson that made this decision. So what does he know?
What does he know?
Exactly.
What does he know?
So okay, number 7, Paul Scholes. Number 6, then Matthew.
Number 6, West Ham boy, Mark Noble. No, I'm joking. No.
I was going to say, surely Mark Noble.
No, he's number one. He's number one. No, Rio Ferdinand. Again, taking it back to what that team. For me, I think, going to be honest, I wanted to put a defender in the list because I went through the list and it was just full of people that whack balls in nets.
I kind of had a similar issue.
To be fair, Rio did that, but also he elevated teams of his day.
I think he was so ahead. I think he was so ahead of his time in that.
As a ball playing centre half.
Yeah, and that he came through.
Say that same thing.
He came through during a time when people used to think that defenders needed to get their shorts dirty in order to have had a good game, and he would argue that no, if I've had a good game, my shorts are going to be spotless because I've not had to recover and dive in. I've been able to read the ball, and that kind of exemplified.
So he was a posh boy. That's what you're saying. No, we could hear you.
Yeah, so yeah, that kind of exemplified what Rio Ferdinand is about, being able to read the situation and cut the danger out before it escalates into making a challenge.
I think when you look at it, teams nowadays, there's that scrabble to get a ball playing centre back. Every top club, without fail, we need to have ball playing centre back. It's the basis of every football team now. And I'm sure, there would be other people, older people, who maybe say people like Franz Beckenbauer was the first centre back. But of the Premier League era, he's the first one I remember looking at and going, he's just so comfortable in possession. And what made him look even better, I think, was he had Vidic next to him, who was the stopper, less talented with the ball, great defender, not very classy. And that allowed Rio to be kind of freer and go and express himself.
Completely agree. I kind of agree exactly what you're saying. Obviously, there were examples before Rio in terms of, as you said, Franz Beckenbauer, Bobby Moore's another one that
but no one that's done what he did in the Prem.
No. Rio Ferdinand kind of typifies that. And to be honest with you, when you kind of look back to centre-backs of, 15, 20 years ago, and you kind of think who would be able to play in a team of today, Rio Ferdinand could slot easily into that Manchester City or even Liverpool back line and be incredible, and he wouldn't have any issues playing out from the back. Whereas if you took, we're talking world-class centre-backs, someone like Vidic, John Terry, Jaap Stam, those kind of players, absolute monsters at the back, but maybe put them in today's game and ask them to do the sort of, ball-playing side of things in the back line of a Manchester City or a Liverpool. I don't think they'd be able to do it to the capability that Rio Ferdinand could do it. So no, I think that's a good shout. And I like that you gave the defenders the limelight, because I was kind of the same as you. My list is very unkind to defenders when there's quite a few there. And the midway,
we'll have our debate about defenders in our number one spot.
Right? Yeah, no, okay. So we're going into the final Europa League spot now. Number 5. What's your choice, Matthew?
So Europa League, it's full of quality. But I think sometimes it's full of quality that maybe, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just going to say it. It's Mr. Beckham.
Wow.
Number 5.
Wow.
He's an amazing player. I can't, in the Prem, I can't justify, he wasn't here, for me anyway. He was around, but was he around for long enough to justify a top 4 spot? Does he justify being in the Champions League?
To be honest with you, I would say that David Beckham, as good a player as he was, doesn't even justify a top 10 spot. I think Beckham's quality and work ethic was outstanding, obviously, and his free kicks were incredible. But personally, even I would have been more likely to have put Eden Hazard in my top 10 than David Beckham, just because as good as a player as David was, I do think in today's game, and I know it's probably a little bit harsh to compare times because players can adapt, and I feel like David Beckham would have been a much more central midfielder in today's game than he would a winger. But even then, I kind of think, he obviously had some great times at Manchester United, but I kind of, he obviously spent possibly, as long outside of Manchester United. He left for Real Madrid in 2003, retired 10 years later. He probably spent the bulk of his career outside the Premier League. And, as I said, as great a player as he was while he was playing in the Premier League, I don't think, for me personally, somewhat, as much of a scumbag as he is, for me, Ryan Giggs would be higher up on that list than David Beckham and quite a few other Manchester United players. But that's just me. What sort of made you think fifth?
I think the thing with David Beckham, what you can't underestimate him is how he grew the league.
Yeah,
I know that's not what we're talking about here, but that's his lasting impact on the game, really, in this country. I think, in terms of growing the Premier League brand, he was the first superstar footballer, really, that I can remember of. He was just known as a celebrity.
I do agree.
I think he deserves a spot on this list for what he's done for the league. As Simon said, and I know we don't like to talk about brand and all that stuff because that's old-fashioned or not cool because it's all about the good old days. But ultimately, the league wouldn't be the league it is today. It wouldn't.
Would you really say that though?
Yeah, I'm not going to credit. I wouldn't credit it all to him, but I think he had a big. He elevated it to the kind of superstardom that I think.
See where I am with
we're
it.
seeing with a lot of players today.
There's no doubting the caliber of celebrity that David Beckham was. He's even today. I would say he's still probably, other than maybe Cristiano Ronaldo, the most famous footballer. At least in our lifetime, probably the most famous footballer in the world right now, or at least former footballer anyway. But even then, I know about the brand of the Premier League because I feel like a big chunk of his brand time again was spent at Real Madrid and LA Galaxy, and I'm not saying he obviously didn't raise the profile of the Premier League because he probably did, but I don't know. I think that's a bit of a funny one.
But I think if we're going to talk about him, I think it's worth mentioning that he's not a stats merchant, right? Like no one's going to look at his stats and go, he's the best player ever. But I think he did bring an element of
I think his quality. I think his quality on the ball.
And I think it's
unbelievable. But again, for me, I think there's a longevity thing. Yeah, it's just a bit of a funny one with David Beckham.
Won the league 6 times. I know he was in an outstanding team.
As I said, there's no doubting his class. I wouldn't even put him in my top 10 as good a player as he was. Yeah, I wouldn't. But
and his missus is fit. Come on, you have to put that in.
She kind of was, but we'll.
It was. Wait, you're saying...
George, we know your type.
You're saying 2020 you wouldn't have a bit of...
Of course I still would. Of course I still would. There's no doubt in that. I just think that she probably peaked about 10 years or so ago. But that's just me, so...
Yeah. I think we peaked 10 years ago.
Didn't we all? So, okay then, so going into the Champions League places, Matthew, who's number 4?
Oh, mate. I would still sorry to derail the cast, the pod, but 2020 Victoria Beckham, absolutely, she's still banging. Anyway, sorry. So number 4 is, now this one is very contemporary, and I think I'll get some flack for it. Is Mr. Sergio Aguero?
I think you'd think wrong.
He is a great player, and to be
great player. I probably wouldn't have him as high as number 4 in terms of...
Out of all the other people in your list that you've probably picked other than Scholes, I think Aguero probably would become the closest to breaking into mine anyway. Spoiler alert. Because, he's just been at City for, 8 years now. The only real slight I can really think on his career is the injuries. Because obviously... By now, if not for the injuries, he'd be in the running for breaking Alan Shearer's Premier League record. But outside of that, I really can't fault Aguero. He's class. He's a natural finisher, and in the last few years, he's actually adapted under Pep Guardiola very successfully. There was big question marks when he came in as to whether Guardiola would usher him out the door, but he became one of the most important players on the pitch for them. And to be honest with you, I think Aguero is, if you were going to talk about the greatest strikers of all time, I think in the Premier League, I feel like you've got to put Aguero into that conversation at the very least.
Yeah, his hair went blonde, he went Super Saiyan, and he's amazing.
Sorry, I think the stats are... Isn't he the 3rd all-time?
Something like that. I think probably only Rooney and Shearer are ahead of him right now.
Because I know he overtook Henry, he's the highest foreign goal scorer, and I thought Henry was 3rd of all time. So, I mean, just those numbers, you listen to that. He's the highest foreign import goal scorer in the Premier League. He is 3rd on the all-time list. He's won, 3 or 4 titles? He's been key to all of those wins.
Come on, George. You've got to have him in your list, mate. I know for a fact he's part of your Premier League favourite moments.
It is, but this
is
a list about moments. This is a list about players and the greatest ones.
Although, can we just discuss that moment though? Because it's
the single most for me. I'm calling it now. It's the single most entertaining moment exhilarating moment in footballing history, not just in Premier League history. For the title to go like that. It was over. Let's be honest. Man United had won that league title. It had finished. The City fans were in bits. They've screwed it up again. The disappointment was unbelievable. Man United had been 8 points clear up to a certain point, and you had no faith that it was ever going to happen. And then Dzeko pops up from the corner, and it all just seemed to, like, time almost stood still as it happened, and it's just Sergio Aguero. It's the best. It's the best individual moment.
Aguero!
It's the best individual moment the Premier League has ever seen, by far.
Whoa, that's your number one in Premier League. That's for a whole nother discussion. But
check out episode 2 of our podcast, everyone.
George, you talk about that moment looking like it's in slow motion. I think what it shows was how good a player Aguero was to have that kind of composure in that ultra biggest moment of
his career, really,
as
well.
That ability to just think. He could have hit it first time. He shuffles a defender and slots it in the corner, and that's kind of epitomises his goal scoring record. When it counts, he put it in, and he always looked like he was going to.
And also a big shout out to Mario Balotelli for his only Premier League assist of his career, at least as of 2020. If he ever makes one.
Was that his only?
Yeah,
I don't know. West Ham might sign him halfway through the season if it all goes pear-shaped.
And it was the title-winning assist in 2012. He never got another assist in English football.
That's so Mario Balotelli.
Yeah, that is so Mario Balotelli. Okay, number 4 is Aguero. As I said, I think probably of all your lists so far, other than Skull, was probably the most deserving, in my opinion anyway. So, okay, number 3, we've got automatic Champions League qualification. No qualifiers now. Who's number 3?
Mr. Rooney.
Okay, Wayne Rooney.
I think this is where I started with goal scorers, and I think he's just been such a name. He was so pivotal. He's still playing in the game now. A ridiculous amount of goals, but also goals sometimes that felt like they came out of nowhere.
Definitely.
At times, you know what I mean. You could argue that there's a lot of strikers that would score a lot of goals and out of someone else's creation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you or me stand at the edge of a goal and Kevin De Bruyne pings some balls in. I think we'll get at least 10 in a season.
I think you're being very generous to us, Matthew.
I think you're overstating our ability a little.
I reckon 10. Maybe you more than me. I'm only 5 foot, so probably a little low balls. But a lot of them came from what felt like a not a huge amount of support. A lot of it was of his own creation. And I think that's what makes him a really special striker.
No, I mean...
Is he on anyone else's list?
I mean, I think...
that's kind of spoilers.
He didn't make my list. I certainly thought about it.
To be fair, Wayne Rooney, I do have to think, I will say this, he's one of the most legendary Premier League footballers of all time. We're talking second highest goal scorer ever. What he achieved at Manchester United was just unbelievable. And there was a point really around, say, 2008, 9, 10... when he was undoubtedly the best out-and-out striker in the world at that point. Not even FIFA cover. There was a point where he was on like every FIFA cover for about 4 or 5 years, and he was unplayable, absolutely unplayable. For the things that he did for Manchester United, the goals that he scored, and then even later in his career, as he was able to, like the quality of Rooney, I feel like it's almost overlooked in this day and age. Yeah. He was able to sit back as he got a bit older in his career, and just some of the goals that he scored. I will say that overhead kick he scored against City, in my opinion, I think that's the greatest Premier League goal ever scored. Again, that's a discussion for another podcast. But for me personally, that's my number one Premier League goal of all time.
And something to remember is that he could be returning to the Premier League soon.
Well, to be honest with you, a little part of me...
But it probably won't, because Derby will fuck up again.
I mean, this is the thing. As of right now, obviously, he's at Derby. But to be honest with you, I think he would still do a job for any mid-table team, if not maybe even a little bit better. I think, you know...
Would you sign him, George, for West Ham?
I know we get a lot of flack for signing players...
That is the most West Ham signing.
But to be fair, I think... You can't doubt his class, and I kind of think, you know, if we built the team, I know, so we're talking about building a team around a 35-year-old Rooney now, but to be fair,
500
you know,
years.
if we could get, you know, something good with the wages, I would definitely have him at West Ham, 100%. And believe me, I'm the one most sick of us signing past it players, but I think the class of Wayne Rooney, it's always going to be there until he retires, and I still think he would do a job at probably most, if not all, mid-table Premier League clubs. I'm a little bit surprised that he's at Derby and not somewhere better right now. Yeah, no, Wayne Rooney. I think that's a valid shout.
I think to add to why he's at Derby, I think truthfully down he wants to play Football Manager, and his missus doesn't let him have a laptop. So I think he's trying to get a manager, but I think, you know, if you look at his, I know slightly different generations, but you know, I think he would like to be somewhere managing a top Premier League club.
Yeah.
But it, you know, for whatever reason, he doesn't really have that pedigree. You know, I think we can argue to the cows come home about whether Frank Lampard deserves to be at Chelsea. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. But, you know, that is what it is. I'm going to get some fucking flack for that.
No, I'm not even looking at Frank. I'd tell you look
I would say Ollie.
Fucking hell. Ollie's not at the wheel. Yeah. Ollie needs to be in a fucking Uber home, mate. He is shit. Anyway.
But I think you talked about people like Gerrard and Lampard, obviously players Rooney played with, and I think he does want to get into management eventually. Not sure whether he was quite as... I think
in footballing terms he was.
You've seen Wayne Rooney, he looks like an ogre. He's not intelligent.
You know, let's be real here. I think about academic or whatever. No, I think in terms of football, though, he still is a very intelligent footballer. He knows, his reading of the game for a forward, I think, was superb. And his vision, just on the pitch, I think is incredible. You know, you think of that ball that he played for Van Persie the last time they won the league when he scored that goal against Aston Villa. To be honest with you, in this day and age, I feel like there are possibly only 3 players currently in the Premier League that could play that kind of ball. And I think they are De Bruyne, Harry Kane and Trent Alexander-Arnold. I don't think anyone else could play that kind of ball that Rooney played for Van Persie. And I do think that I know what you're talking, because obviously the way he comes across in the media, it's not great, especially when you take into consideration the personal elements of you know, how the media have attacked him. And
depends who he's been in now.
Yeah, but from a footballing perspective, he's unbelievably intelligent, Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, but I think he'd have to mature if he wanted to be a manager. He's been lots of controversy. I know that they're going back some, but he's a bit hot-headed. He's always been a bit like that. You just need to tone that down to be a manager. You look at Roy Keane.
Matthew, your runner-up, number 2.
So this one, I think, will be contentious.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think you know, of the person who's number 1 on my list, they're both people that haven't been here for or weren't in the Prem for a huge amount of time. But I think the impact that they had with the Prem, what they did while they were here, and I think what they did for the league has elevated to the position it is. My number 2 is Thierry Henry.
Yeah, no, to be honest with you, I can definitely vibe with that. To be honest, I think Thierry Henry's a great shout, even at number 2. You know, brilliant player.
Yeah.
You know,
and in the grand scheme of things, he wasn't there for that long.
I think, to be fair, he kind of was. He was there the best part of 10 years, I think.
Was he there for 10
years? Almost. I think.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He signed in the 90s, didn't he?
He showed up around 90. I think he showed up around 97, 98. Around that, maybe 98, 99, that kind of time.
He was. Yeah. I think because maybe he had it feels like he had such a long career after that.
A good few years at Barcelona and then Red Bull, didn't he? So,
Red Bulls, and then went back to Arsenal.
And that brief when he was back at Arsenal for about a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
4 appearances.
But no, I mean,
I kind of have
no
issues with Thierry Henry being on that list at all. Not at all. No.
And you can't, can you? I mean,
it's almost objective at that point. Almost objective.
Yeah. Then I'm not. Yeah. I mean, I think the only my number one will be more contentious than that.
Really?
Well, I think the thing that I always think about Thierry Henry is if you listen to any player who played in the Premier League against Thierry Henry, routinely they ask them, who's the best player you ever played against? Pretty much all of them go, Thierry was the most difficult. He had that ability to run with the ball, move in both directions, could make a pass, score great goals. It looked like he was quicker with the ball than without the ball, like one of those rare players.
Yeah.
Seemed to glide with it. It looked so effortless to him.
He definitely did. He definitely did. I think we're all happy with that one. So then, Matthew, who is your Premier League winner of the Premier League's greatest players of all time?
I think...
Who's lifting the trophy?
Who is lifting that trophy?
It's... So for me, it can only be one guy. I don't think we should argue this. He graced the game for a little while. He didn't do his best... Well, he did quite good work here. But it's Mr. Cristiano Ronaldo. That's my number one.
Okay, I think I can definitely see that.
Definitely see it.
Yeah, you know, Ronaldo is Ronaldo. To be honest with you,
it's Ronaldo. There's there would be another player above him if he'd ever come in.
And you know, I am playing devil's advocate when I say this. The only thing that I would say is that you could argue that the Premier League probably didn't see the best of Ronaldo. You know, his best.
Which is incredible when you look at statistics.
I know. No, for me, the
that.
best of Ronaldo came in La Liga, and you know, I'm not going to deny I am clutching here when I say this. I feel like the only thing you could really throw at Ronaldo is that I would love to have seen what he would have done in the Premier League over the last decade. You know, I'd love to have seen where Man United would be now if they never got rid of him and if he'd stayed there this entire time. You know, as I said, that's really clutching, to be honest, because obviously it's Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, that last season when he scored like 40 odd goals for Manchester United, it was just unbelievable, and he rightly deserved the Ballon d'Or that year.
A nutcase.
Won them the Champions League in LA as well, pretty much.
Oh,
he was
unbelievable.
Key to that win. And he was justified that world record price tag of £80 million at that time. There was no better player in the world than him.
And you know, he returned that money over like in infinite amount, really. Like they made so much
in many Champions Leagues.
Definitely.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. That's my
Matt's list. Shall we just have a quick run back through of?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, from starting in the mid-table, it's Mr. Hazard, Mr. Eden Hazard, Kevin De Bruyne, Harry Kane, Paul Scholes. Coming into the midfield, we've got Rio Ferdinand, David Beckham. I'll put in there from an influential perspective. Number 4, Aguero. 3, Rooney. 2, Thierry Henry. And number 1, Mr. Ronaldo.
Okay.
Mr.
CR7 at number 1. Is the
CR7.
Premier League champion of Matthew Lee's list. Go for it then, our resident tractor boy. Give us your top 10 greatest Premier League players of all time.
I mean, we talked about before the issue of trying to think of defenders who should make the list.
Yeah.
So it's partially why I think I put him in there. But number 10, Ashley Cole.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, he was a great player. He was obviously a left back.
Yeah.
The forgotten fullbacks. He was part of that Arsenal Invincibles team. I mean, he was a great player. He got up and down on the left flank. He won pretty much everything there was.
Do you think in this kind of conversation when people talk about the greatest Premier League players of all time, do you think that Ashley Cole was a bit of a forgotten man? Because I did think of him, to be fair. You know, do you think that he maybe gets overlooked a little bit? And do you think that might be because of, again, in a similar sort of sense to Rooney? Do you think maybe some of the off-field stuff, kind of makes people forget that actually he probably was the great... If I was going to pick a fullback in a Premier League all-time 11, Ashley Cole would take my left-back spot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're right, some of the off-field stuff obviously clouds people's judgment a little bit. It's also the fact that fullbacks of old, they're just not very interesting, are they?
I mean, that is true.
It's always the forgotten position.
But do you think that Ashley Cole was kind of
failed wingers or failed centre backs?
Would you say that Ashley Cole was kind of ahead of his time, though? Because I think he would. I think, again, if you take the fullbacks of old, as good as a player as say, someone like Gary Neville was, obviously, one of the greatest right backs the Premier League has ever seen. In this day and age, how effective would Gary Neville be constantly, you know, bombing up and down? Whereas I think on the left side of things, Ashley Cole would be perfectly suited to, you know, playing in the modern game and wouldn't look uncomfortable at all.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think he could have played further up the pitch, probably as like a wing back as well. I mean, he had that attacking intent, love getting forward, overlapping. I mean, you think of who he played with, like the likes of Pires and people like this, getting round them on the overlap.
Ian Robin points while he was at Chelsea.
Can I just ask a question though? Does Ashley Cole get in to a top 4 team playing as left or right back? Well, let's say left back.
Yes.
Yeah. In his peak, he definitely does.
It's not even a question.
What team?
Does. I don't.
Team.
Every current team in the Premier League, if you take a peak Ashley Cole,
you drop him instead of Chilwell.
For me, 100% you do.
It wouldn't even be a question. It wouldn't even be close.
For me, it's not even a debate. Ashley Cole in his peak. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, it's a little bit unfair on Robertson and Chilwell because obviously they're still relatively young.
Yeah, that's the thing. Obviously, maybe in the essence of time, those two because they are doing things as fullbacks that getting numbers that are just unheard of. You think of Robertson. Yeah. Got 16 assists last season from fullback, which is madness.
But yeah, for me,
so maybe in the fullness of time,
but to be honest with you though, you talk about Robertson, Robertson's numbers, and obviously they are very, very impressive. There's no getting away from that, and he's an unbelievable left back. But I think if you put peak Ashley Cole in the same system, I think you'd get a similar return. I really do. Ashley Cole is easily for me the best left back of the Premier League.
It's hard to compare the eras because Ashley Cole in a fluent attacking side.
And obviously Ashley Cole largely starred, at least for Chelsea, in a very defensive team, you know, under Mourinho, the ones that got the most amount of success. They would go 2-0 up and then it would be shut up shop time. So I kind of think, you know, maybe at least in his Chelsea years, he didn't play in an attacking team really, but he could do both, undoubtedly. And I do think that...
Well, and I think that's probably the advantage he has over, say, a Robertson or a Chilwell, is he's a great defender as well as having that ability to run with the ball and get forward up the pitch. And from that point of view, he was kind of a two-way fullback, which is what you want.
Oh, completely.
You talk about various
players the complete fullback. You couldn't ask for anything more in a fullback, in my opinion, than Ashley Cole. So, I've got to say that I think that's a very good opening number 10. You know, Matt, do you have anything further to say on that, or...
No, I think I think I agree with a lot of the points that were raised there. Really, like I think he definitely played an instrumental part of that Chelsea team, and probably laid a bit of the groundwork that bit more dynamic full-back pairing. So let's move on to number 9.
So number 9, probably I'd say my most controversial pick. We mentioned his name earlier, and you talk about Ashley Cole being a potentially underrated player of the Premier League era. I think this guy is too. David Silva.
Big.
What this guy has done for the Premier League, I don't think you can quantify it. In terms of, we talked about Rio Ferdinand being this kind of ball-playing centre-back and being kind of the first one to really be that kind of player. In terms of that number 10 who like drifts in between the lines and fills that space, I mean, every team now wants a player like that. They all look for a player like that. And David Silva was the first one I remember watching and going, Christ. I mean, he picks up the ball in positions that you just don't expect to see him. He's a nightmare to mark because who's picking him up? Is he a defender's job? Is it a midfielder's job? And his ability to pick passes was just insane.
Yeah, 100% see where you're coming from, and he's one that definitely, crossed my mind when making this list. The only thing that I feel like I could really maybe hold against David Silva is as much of a magician as he was in terms of his position, his eye for a pass. He had a wonderful left foot. The only thing that I can really throw at David Silva, it might be a little bit harsh, but again, it's kind of the same, not so much as Hazard because different type of players, but sometimes do you ever feel like that maybe that he should be pushing for the most assists a season? Sometimes I always felt that maybe he had a few more goals and assists in him than he would end up.
I think when you look at stats, I mean, stats can be so misleading.
I don't disagree.
The way he makes a team tick around is fantastic, and he drags defenders out the way for other players to score. I agree, he was not a particularly good finisher. You look at his record, that kind of backs that up. He never notched kind of 10, 15 goals a season, did he? Which, as an attacking midfielder, that's the kind of numbers you sort of look at. And that probably is why he isn't mentioned in the same echelons as some of the great midfield players of the Premier League, because he didn't ever do that. But I love the kind of player he is, just that ability just to make the team tick over, and just he never seemed to give the ball away, always seemed to have time. And I just think when you look at him, for me, he was one of the best that I've seen.
I mean, as I said, I wonderful footballer, obviously, no doubting his class and ability. I did debate putting him in mine. So yeah, I can completely see where you're coming from in that sense. So we've had your number 9, number 8. Who are we thinking then?
So number 8, this is the first crossover. I think I had him a bit higher up the list, but Rio Ferdinand in at number 8. Again, thinking of defenders that changed the game, ball playing centre backs, that kind of thing. We've had the discussion on Rio so far, and I've kind of given my justification of what I like about him. He was big, he was strong, he was good on the ball, and one of the best of the Premier League era. No question.
No, that's fair enough. I think we've kind of said all we needed to say about Rio Ferdinand. Great player, obviously. So going into the, who's just missing out on Europa League, coming in at number 7. Who's missing out on that European spot?
Who's Burnley?
I think me and Matt had this guy in the same place actually. Paul Scholes in at number 7.
Wow. Okay.
Again, for the reasons discussed previously, great passer, combative, really strong on the ball, and talking about a player that makes a team tick around them. Paul Scholes had that ability, didn't he? Didn't Xavi say he was the best midfielder in the world?
Yeah, I think Xavi said that. I also think Zidane said a very similar thing as well. You talk about the calibre of players that are, highly rating Paul Scholes. I think that says a lot about the sort of player that Paul Scholes was.
So, again, that's why he's there. Potentially could be higher, but you mentioned the Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard trilemma.
Yeah.
That might play a bit more of a role as we move forward.
Okay. So who's number 6? Who's hitting that second Europa League spot?
So here I have put Frank Lampard. Okay. Premier League's highest goal-scoring midfielder, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah, you are correct. Yes, he was. There was a point where he was averaging about 20 goals a season consistently, which from midfield is unbelievable, obviously.
Yeah, and he was just an unbelievable footballer. Let's be honest. The longevity of his career, that ability that he had of just arriving late, you'd be like, no one in the box. Suddenly Lampard's in there. He just would there'd be knockdowns here to the box, he'd just sweep it home. And he did that time and time again. I mean, almost to the point of it got a bit boring. He just Lampard's in, edge of the box, he scored again.
It's funny that you say that, because
West Ham boy.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say that, actually,
just time a run, didn't he?
Simon, because I was going to say that, do you think in this day and age that maybe, you put him in your list, and I think it's a completely justified decision, but do you think that maybe sometimes, I wouldn't necessarily say overlooked, but do you think that people maybe sometimes forget just how good a footballer Frank Lampard was? Like, we're talking in 2006, he came second in the Ballon d'Or, only behind Ronaldinho of all players, which I think kind of really sheds a light on how good a player Frank Lampard was. And do you kind of think that people only really kind of remember him for scoring goals and not every other aspect of his game that was obviously world class? He could pick a fantastic ball, and his positioning, people talk about the goals, but I don't feel like they give him the credit for how aware of, the danger, and how he would constantly be able to find these little pockets and just be in the right place at the right time. And again, I feel like people kind of forget that those kind of elements of his game, and kind of just talk about the goal scoring. At least that's what I've found. I don't know if you agree or not.
I think that's potentially fair, but I think when you look at the basis of Frank Lampard's game, of what was the thing that stood Frank Lampard head and shoulders above other Premier League midfielders, I'd say Scholes towards the end. I mean, I know Scholes early on was more of a goal-scoring midfielder, was that ability to just burst through into the box and just get on the end of balls. And I think you're right, he had a great all-round game, didn't he? He could play passes forever, he had the ability, he made a good tackle as well. I mean, you look at him, he had that ability as well, just to kind of break up the play. Kind of an all-round midfield player. But for me, the thing that I remember, I mean, I was kind of a bit younger when he was probably at his peak, I was probably about 10, 11, and the thing that sticks out in my head when I think back to him was him running in to the box, getting on the end of all those goals, particularly when he was playing with like Didier Drogba. Like Drogba holding the ball up for Lampard to come in and finish it. How many times did we see that script again and again?
Very true. Okay, so Frank Lampard, as I said, I do think that's a justified one. So number 5, who's just missing out on that Champions League spot?
So number 5 in the Europa League spot. I mean, he would never have played in the Europa League if he was playing. Was Dennis Bergkamp.
Yep.
Maybe a bit of a a left field choice.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think I'm completely with you on Bergkamp. I think Bergkamp was I think again, we had that talk about Kevin De Bruyne and technical ability, and if this was a list based purely on technical ability, for me, Dennis Bergkamp has to be in there. Basically, some of the skills that he, the way he beat players, some of the goals were just. They defied. I want to say they defied logic, but to be honest, you just watch them go in and you watch some of the things he did with a football and think, how on earth has he done that? Like, you couldn't even dream of doing some of the things that Dennis Bergkamp actually did in real life. He was just a phenomenal footballer.
Yeah. How many years was he in the Prem?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that ability to kind of drop off and fill space. I mean, he had that ability. He scored some really. I mean, you look at his kind of goals for Arsenal, and you're like, as you say, some of them you're like, what? I can't believe you even thought about doing that. Let alone have the audacity to attempt it, and let alone pull it off. It's incredible. His first touch was unbelievable as well. You look at him, the ball fizzed into him, and the only one I think ever got close in terms of only first touch, not in terms of all-round game, was Berbatov. You could just hit balls to him at seemingly any angle, and it would just caress and fall at his feet, and he'd move with it. He's a great footballer to watch. And you talk about players who always look like they had time. He always looked like he had time. It just looked
I completely agree. I would also say as well for Bergkamp that he really kind of revolutionised the game in the sense that, he came in around Arsenal, just that the drinking culture was kind of just about to die. And, he turns up, they all wanted Mars bars and whatever, and he kind of turns up, Arsene Wenger signed him, and, he pulls out a banana and starts eating it, and all the players are like, who the fuck is this guy? And then as soon as they get on that training pitch, they know exactly what Dennis Bergkamp is about, and I kind of feel like he was in terms of players, he was very revolutionary in this, nutrition element of the game that we have now, where it's so focused on, and it's so important.
He loved bananas. We're giving him credit for that.
We're not just loving bananas, but it's just
that's not why he's made the list.
This was during a time where Matt Letizia would go and get an Egg McMuffin on his way to training.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about the professionality of the game. Is professionality a word?
His professionalism.
Professionalism is the word you're looking for.
Professionality. I like professionality. I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, I just think when you look at his vision, you talk about players with great vision. His passes then were just unbelievable. And I think probably for a centre forward, he's the first centre forward that was actually a good footballer as well as being a good kind of.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I think
as I said, his technical ability was unreal.
They were more kind of just the goal scorer. That's all you did. He did everything. He was that good.
I don't want to be the resident stat goblin, but I'm going to be. How many goals do you reckon he got in his, 11 years in the Prem? 10, 11 years?
Just under 100, I reckon.
Yeah, I'd agree. But
87.
Yeah, I'm going to say Dennis Bergkamp was so much more in goals, for sure, I would say.
Yeah. No, I agree.
No, and I think it's a valid point you raised as a centre forward. Did he score enough? Maybe he didn't, but you look at the goals he did score of those 87.
Oh, yeah.
There were some very, very good goals in there. And that Arsenal team was built around Dennis Bergkamp and Thierry Henry as a partnership. And they worked so well as a unit. Because he dropped off, Henry got in behind, and I mean that's why the Invincibles were the Invincibles. They had those two as the cornerstone.
It's almost like I don't want to go on a tangent here, but it's almost like people often get on to Firmino about his goal ratio or the number of goals he gets, and I think it's
a very similar comparison. Actually, I agree. I don't feel like he gets enough credit for how good a footballer he is and how much of a linchpin he is in that team for the way that Liverpool play. And Dennis Bergkamp was very similar, to be honest with you.
Similar, but miles better.
Obviously.
A different, being a linchpin for the Arsenal team, Bergkamp was miles more important than Firmino is to Liverpool.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah. I do agree. I do think Firmino. I
agree. They're different calibers.
But 100%. I think Bergkamp deserves to be on that list. So Champions League football then, Simon. Who is taking your fourth spot?
Probably a good place for him because he was a Champions League legend as well as a Premier League legend, I would say. And the third leg of the Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard trilemma, it's Steven Gerrard at number 4. And I know people. We could have this debate forever between those three. Who was the best? Everyone will have their opinion. It'll all be different, and we will never come to a consent. For me, why I would say Steven Gerrard is the best, in my eyes, was the teams that Scholes and Lampard played in were that much better than the teams that Gerrard played in. Gerrard had to carry the responsibility not only of his teammates, but of the club of Liverpool. You think how big that is. You think how many players have buckled under that pressure. He had to do that for years and years and years, and he scored important goals every year. Started his career as kind of a box-to-box midfielder. He then migrated to being more defensive midfielder. I mean, the reason why I think a lot of people are going to say that he doesn't deserve to be this high, he didn't win the Premier League.
That's what
was going to be my go-to argument, actually. Obviously, as you said, he did play in much lesser teams than what Scholes and Lampard played in, obviously. So that's the big thing that kind of obviously a lot of people do hold over Steven Gerrard, is the fact that he'd never won the Premier League. But then, success isn't, at least in some, medals isn't always a measure of how good a player is, obviously. But
and this is the point I'm making. That some of the teams that he had to be involved in were so far off being top teams, and the only reason they ever got close was because Gerrard carried them that far.
Very much
even towards the end of his career, he was so important every season to that Liverpool team.
He definitely was. So
I don't know. I really remember watching Gerrard, particularly 08-09, when he had that relationship with Fernando Torres.
They were unbelievable together. Unbelievable partnership. So, let's rewind the clock a bit back to around 2005 and 6, and Mourinho's Chelsea are making it their be-all and end-all to sign Steven Gerrard. Do you think that he should have gone? And also, had he gone and had he won the Premier League title, which obviously he would have done with Chelsea, because that team would have only been even better with Gerrard in. But do you think that had he gone to Chelsea and won Premier League titles with him, in a lot of people's eyes, he would be maybe even higher up the list, or at least certainly better than Scholes and Lampard? Or do you think that he made the right decision and stayed at Liverpool?
I mean, I'll respect him for his choice of staying at Liverpool, because loyalty in football is a thing that is just not a thing. He could have easily gone to any of the top teams in Europe and the world. He was that good. You talk about Frank Lampard coming second in the Ballon d'Or in 2006. Wasn't Gerrard third?
Very possibly. Possibly.
I think he got very close to winning the Ballon d'Or in that era. And again, you talk about the Liverpool team he was in. For him to get that close to winning a Ballon d'Or for a team that, I know they won the Champions League 2005. They were one of the worst teams to ever win the Champions League. That 2005 Liverpool team, I 100% agree. You take Steven Gerrard out of that team, they obviously don't come back and win that final. But other than Steven Gerrard, really probably the only player close to his caliber of player, Xabi Alonso. You take those two out of that team, and that team is absolutely, maybe, all right, Jamie Carragher was decent, but was a very good centre back. And Sami Hyypiä. So I think they had a spy. But you think like Jimmy Traore played in that final. Stephen Finnan at right back. Kewell on the wing.
Absolutely.
This is not a team that should have won a Champions League.
Absolutely terrible team.
I mean, they were a hair's breadth of going out at the group stage, weren't they? But Gerrard scored that last minute equaliser, the winner against Olympiacos, that got them through. They were going out, but again, that was the mark of Steven Gerrard, scoring important goals. And I'm going to bring it up.
The FA Cup.
Not going to like bring it up. The 06 FA Cup. Again, last minute, a game that Liverpool hadn't played well in, didn't deserve to win, and Gerrard carries them over the line, because that's the kind of player he was.
I think it's also worth mentioning, Simon, that he also slipped.
I was going to say this because obviously we've got all these fantastic Gerrard moments.
I'm not going to blame him for that.
And that's obviously certainly the low point of Steven Gerrard's footballing career. But you talk about all these big moments in terms of Champions League and the FA Cup, because obviously he was instrumental. Do you think the same? Obviously he played very well and was rightly earned his way into a lot of team of the years in terms of Premier League team of the years. But do you think that those big moments, obviously none of them came really in the, at least to that level, none of them really came in the Premier League, where you kind of think that, say, Frank Lampard scored the goal that ultimately got Chelsea over the line in their first title win under Mourinho? Do you think that maybe holds Gerrard back a little bit?
You have to be in a team that can win the Premier League to have those big moments. You can't have big moments without being in a team that's close to the title. That's the problem that Gerrard faces. So you can get a cup without being a great team, and they proved that. But you can't win a league without being a great team, and you can't have big moments without being close to winning titles, because that's the only thing that really matters at that stage.
No, to be fair, that
would be my counter argument. And I know that Gerrard is probably bottom of most people's list when you count those three. I think I really respect his leadership as well.
He was an unbelievable leader, and to be honest with you, I only really
to just carry a team, to carry the city of Liverpool, be under no illusion of how difficult that is.
It's massive, mate.
That cosmic,
big old city
place of football, where football is religion. Gerrard had to carry that on his own through some quite difficult times, and he did that, and he managed that and had a brilliant career doing that.
Yeah.
And I think
no, I do agree. I think that's a very valid entry to your list. So we move on now, I believe, to the number 3 spot.
Yep, number 3. Ryan Giggs.
Fair? No.
I think he's got to be somewhere in one of these lists. He was just a brilliant player, and you look at the longevity. I mean, we talk about longevity as being a metric. I mean, he started playing in the Premier League 4 years before any of us on this podcast were born, and he continued playing until we were in our teenage years.
Yeah.
So I think that is the mark of his ability to keep himself going and focused. He scored a goal in every Premier League season.
His very last one he didn't,
believe,
but yeah,
which was his last one.
He had scored up until that point.
So,
he had scored in every Premier League,
every
Premier League season ever up until his last season.
Yeah, and that shows that shows to me is that he was not only playing, but he was still contributing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it got to a point of he was just on the wayside and he wasn't really doing anything. For his whole career, he was contributing goals, assists, and you think of some of the big moments that he's
Giggs was unbelievable, and I've got to say this, and obviously again, this is a very probably controversial topic, and it's certainly one for further discussion. But obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson has said that he only managed 4 world-class players. And that 4 includes Eric Cantona, Cristiano Ronaldo, Paul Scholes, and Ryan Giggs. And you think, everyone else that we've mentioned, every other fantastic Man United player, I think that says something that Sir Alex Ferguson included Giggs in that of only 4 players, when you could argue that really they had maybe even 10, 11 world-class players, that Fergie made, maybe even more, if you really want to get into the depths of what is a world-class player. No, I do agree. You talk about the longevity. How many Premier League appearances are we talking? We're talking record Premier League appearances here.
Hundreds and hundreds of games.
That's it.
I think
we're talking like 900 games for Man United, aren't we? With Ryan Giggs, it's just unbelievable feat.
632 Premier League appearances.
Yeah. That's incredible number.
Yeah.
For Man United as well. Like, this isn't a case of he's dropping down the league to mid-table side. This is 632 games for the uber Premier League winners of the era that he was playing in.
Even now, and we talk about it.
Couldn't touch, particularly early on. He was so.
And we talk about it as well. Him playing in that team, but we're talking about the most decorated British player of all time in Ryan Giggs.
How he was never picked for England.
I know, isn't it? How on earth he never played for England, I will not know.
He was never picked for England. What? Not even in his younger years. Like, I understand when he was 1,000 years old.
Matt, he's Welsh.
Oh shit! Yeah, fuck. That's right.
Famously Welsh.
Oh yeah, he manages him now, doesn't he? Why did I buy that?
No, this is the thing. I had to wait for a second to gauge whether you were being sarcastic in your answer or not, and then when I figured that you weren't, I was like, "Oh no, I've got to tell him."
Do you know what's stupid about that? One of my points was I was going to add is, doesn't he manage the Wales team?
Yeah, he does. Now? Well, when he's not in prison, obviously.
Why is he going to prison?
Well, he was arrested He was arrested for domestic abuse this week.
Oh.
Yeah, he's got arrested for assault.
This is very off topic. So, okay then, we had
of his court case.
Maybe we should.
Ryan Giggs at number 3. Who takes the runner-up spot then, Simon?
The runner-up spot is Alan Shearer. What can you say about him? Top record Premier League scorer. Scored all kinds of goals. I mean, he scored some absolutely unbelievable goals, didn't he? The one I remember, was it that volley against Everton?
Yeah, no, that was unbelievable. Yeah,
you know the goal.
Yeah, that was unbelievable.
Where he chests it down, left foot on the volley into the top corner. Again, you talked about top Premier League goals as maybe a discussion for a later date, but he scored a range of goals, headers, volleys, left foot, right foot. He was just
the complete. He was the complete striker, as you said. There was nothing that he didn't have. He wasn't missing anything from his game. As you said, he could do it all. It didn't matter what foot. It didn't matter whether it was with his head. For me, for a long time, I've kind of said that Harry Kane is basically Alan Shearer reincarnated, and I still. Obviously Kane's still playing, so we're going to see how that, how he ends his career. But I still kind of, at least in terms of his finishing and his striker, not talking about his passing game, I still stick by that. Alan Shearer was just everything that you would ever want in a centre forward. And sort of harping back to the Steven Gerrard thing a little bit, I again would kind of say in a similar way that I said, should Steven Gerrard have left Liverpool? Would you say that Alan Shearer should have left Newcastle, because obviously he won the Premier League at Blackburn.
For me, that's actually more definite that he should have done. I mean, it's not like Newcastle were ever particularly close to winning the title while he was there, barring maybe very early on when Keegan was manager. I don't know if he was in that side or not. But for me, he would have made that United team of that era so much stronger, and that, I think, is testament to how good a player he was. They would have won. United would have won more if Shearer was with them, and Shearer would have definitely won more titles if he was at Man United.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Make no mistake about that. What I loved about him was when he scored goals, it was almost an expectancy that he was going to score. I mean, even with his celebrations, it was so understated. It's like, yeah, I scored, but I always score because that's what I do. I'm the centre forward. I score goals, and he scored them at such a rate. I mean, you think of that. I mean, to get that Blackburn side. I mean, talk about poor team, not poor team, but a team that was not really expected to win the league. I know they had some good players, but it was that Shearer and Sutton partnership. And I got issues with Chris Sutton, but that's another topic. But Alan Shearer was the talisman. He was the one who got them over the line, really. He scored kind of 25, 30 goals that season. And he did that 3 or 4 times over his career. Got above 30 goals.
Definitely.
He must have 3 or 4 golden boots in his...
You've got to think as well, actually, because obviously I know this is the Premier League's greatest players of all time, but he was scoring goals before the Premier League started, and you kind of that tally. Imagine if he was playing in the Premier League the entire time, that tally would be even more of a mountain than it already is. So you have to give credit to Shearer, to be honest with you. He's, again, if you talk about the greatest strikers the Premier League has ever seen, you've definitely, if he's not your number one, he's definitely in the conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I think what you'd say is, you look at that record, no one's ever got particularly close to breaking it. I mean, eventually somebody might...
Well, obviously Wayne Rooney is second.
But as you look right now, we talk about Harry Kane being this great goal scorer. He's got 140 goals. He's still 111
I know,
away.
it's unbelievable.
He's still miles off
I think Rooney is the only other man to have scored more than 200. And it's such it's a mountain of a record, let's be real.
Yeah, great player, awful hairline.
Yeah, funny enough, I don't think that really factors in when we make this list.
Is that all you've got to add to this conversation, Matt?
No, valid point. No, I think you're right. I think he probably should have gone elsewhere, especially to Manchester United. But respect him for the player he was, and an outstanding goal scoring career. He did have a huge amount of assists considering his appearance, but that's because he was too busy bagging them for himself.
He did not care about assists.
Every goal scoring chance,
he was always about putting that ball in the back of the net himself, 100%. So I think number 2. I think that's a valid shout there, Simon. So who takes your Premier League crown? Who is getting the champagne in this list?
So my top of the list, and I think he was harshly judged at number 2 by my previous list maker, Thierry Henry, is my number 1 choice. And we just talking about goal scorers at Shearer's assist totals were non-existent. You're talking Thierry Henry, a guy who scored all the goals, yet somehow still has the assist record as well. He was just an unbelievable player, all-round player. Quick, strong, pacey. I mean, we've talked about a lot of this stuff already.
100%.
Part of that Invincibles team. Just a Premier League legend, and a player that when I started really liking football, you just watch him. Oh my god.
Unbelievable class.
He's just crazy. You can't touch him. You can't get near him. He's that good.
Phenomenal.
So that's why he wins the title for me. Part of the Invincibles, but I'm sure this is actually a prouder moment.
Oh, definitely. What's an Invincibles Premier League win in comparison to being number 1?
I think we could,
Simon's list.
We could make a whole thing about the Invincibles.
Oh, definitely we could. Okay, so
a lot of draws.
There was a lot of draws in there, wasn't there? So, Simon, run through your list with us again quickly. Just give us a little recall.
So my list starts in mid-table with Ashley Cole, number 9, David Silva, number 8, Rio Ferdinand, number 7, Paul Scholes. Into the Europa League potentially, on who's won the FA Cup, is Frank Lampard at 6 and Dennis Bergkamp at number 5. Hitting those Champions League spots is number 4, Steven Gerrard, number 3, Ryan Giggs, number 2, Alan Shearer, and the champion of the lot of them, top of the league,
and a very, very worthy winner, if I do say so myself.
I'm gonna. Can I?
Leaves our illustrious host.
Can I just
to give us his list?
Can I just say something on Thierry Henry? I feel like I always judge him lower because he's an Arsenal player, and I know that's wrong. But my hatred of Arsenal, I think, just shines through a little bit with him. Fair enough. Sorry, continue.
No worries.
Just wanted to whack it out
top
there.
10. So as we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, I feel like we didn't give the defenders a lot of love, which is probably a little bit harsh considering, there are some absolute legendary defenders in the Premier League. So going mid-table at number 10, I am going with John Terry. So obviously, John Terry.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? And I will have to give, before I delve into as to why, I will have to give a shout out, because I did want to include a defender. Oh yeah, spoiler alert, there are no goalkeepers in this list. Sorry, Peter Schmeichel, David De Gea, you're not making the cut. But yeah.
Petr Cech.
Yeah.
Lucas Fabianski isn't in there.
But yeah, in terms of John Terry, I did want to put a centre back in there because, he narrowly beat off Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, and Vincent Kompany as well. He narrowly beat those off. But the reason why I've gone with John Terry is just, not only because, of the titles he won, how much of a leader he was, obviously, huge presence in that Chelsea dressing room, arguably, possibly, the most important Chelsea player of all time. That can be debated, of course. But for me, the thing that John Terry that really sort of sets him about is because obviously he had no pace, but you never missed his pace because his reading of the game was simply sublime. He always seemed to know where the ball was going to be before it went there, and as a result, he would be there to cover it, and he'd be able to get rid of it. And of course, he just had this, he was a soldier. He constantly put himself on the line, defended with all the bravery of a lion. And I just think, as I said, very narrow. But yeah, I've gone with John Terry as my number 10. I don't know what you guys think to that, whether you agree or disagree.
George, I'm going to ask you the same question that you asked me about Ashley Cole. Do you think he's not rated as highly by some people as he possibly should be because of some off-field issues that maybe cloud people's judgment?
I do think that's probably very likely. Obviously, let's be real. You talk about off-field issues. Obviously the Wayne Bridge situation, but even on-field, if we talk about the Anton Ferdinand thing,
can we break that down for me? Because I've never really fully understood what the crack was there.
It never got proved, did it? But
so what were the allegations?
So effectively, he slept with Wayne Bridge's wife at the time, while they were.
And Wayne Bridge was a player.
While they were both teammates at Chelsea, and they were supposedly
so they're
supposedly like best mates as well. And then the heat really kind of got going when they played against each other. Wayne Bridge was playing for City. This was just after City got the big, money takeover, and Wayne Bridge just refused to shake his hand.
He was like, "I know where that's been. Don't want to fucking take that one."
So yeah, that was obviously. The off-field stuff. And again, obviously, there was the whole issue with Anton Ferdinand where obviously, he racially abused Anton Ferdinand. And to be fair, what can you say? He's a scumbag of a man. But I think if you're talking about players and how good they were, I do think that Terry is worthy of his spot on the list. Again, you can agree or disagree.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And your points about him as a defender are completely right. His ability just to read the game, not particularly quick, but I mean, and what you haven't mentioned is his goal-scoring ability from centre back. His ability to get forward and attack the ball from corner kicks. I mean, he must have got 4 or 5 goals a season, pretty much every season.
To be honest with you, in terms of goal-scoring centre-backs, the only person I can really think of that's better than him is Sergio Ramos at Real Madrid. That kind of shows you how deadly he was while he was going forward, from corners and things like that. As you said, he notched at least 4 or 5 goals a season.
A bit of a toss-pot, is that what we're saying? One of them slept with the wife, another one broke a Egyptian's man arm. They're making a bit of reputation there.
A little bit. Well, this is just.
George likes the bad boys. He always has, and he always will.
I mean, this is just number 10. So we obviously spoke earlier about not giving defenders enough love, and my number 9. We've not given any shout outs to any holding players at all. I don't think so. Again, I wanted to include a holding player, and it basically.
Rob Holding's alright, but he's not that good.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. You got me.
I'm here all week.
Yeah, Rob Holding is my number 9 greatest player of all time in the Premier League. So it came down to.
In fairness, I'll give that to Matt.
And it was very, very quick as well. I will give you that.
He was on the ball.
But yeah, it basically boiled down to 2 players, and one of which is very unlucky not to have made it. I've gone with number 9, Patrick Vieira, just what can you say about the man? Arsenal have still not really replaced him at all, and he was such an engine in that Arsenal midfield. But not only that, he could also play as well, so he did the defensive, the nitty-gritty side of things, and then he could also just pick out a pass and run for days and days and days. I just think, and you talk about the battles that he had, and the man that narrowly missed out on number 9 spot on my list is Roy Keane. Those two, Arsenal, Man United, they typified that fixture, and I couldn't make this list and not include one of them on the list just because...
Yeah, I can completely see where you're coming from, and he was a hair's breadth away from making my list as well. If we were doing number 11, he'd have probably got number 11. As you say, he was a great player. You talk of him as a holding player, but he did have...
Oh, completely. He could score goals from holding midfield as well. That was such a big attribute of his. He was the complete midfielder in my mind.
And you talk about those Arsenal United battles with Roy Keane, they were
unbelievable stuff.
Games. This is going to be unreal. I mean, you see that everyone's seen that footage of Keane and Vieira in the tunnel, kind of having a go at each other. It was battling the Titans.
And you've got to think as well, because obviously he left Arsenal 14 years or so ago now. I still don't think there's been a holding player in the Premier League as good as what he was for them. Obviously some players like N'Golo Kante obviously come close, but personally, again, I take peak Vieira over Kante.
The other one I put in from today's era is potentially Fernandinho.
Yeah, that's another good shout, Fernandinho. I just think Vieira was just more...
Declan Rice.
No, I agree. It's not on the level of Patrick Vieira, but if you're talking about holding midfielders today...
Declan Rice.
He's got a little way to go yet, Matt. A little way to go.
You can sit down and be quiet. You're going to throw Declan Rice into this.
But yeah.
Yeah, funny fucking...
But yeah, okay, so that was my number 9. Going into number 8. And this might be considered a little bit low for the calibre of player that he is. I think if we were talking about, his ability alone and and definitely if you took into account what he's achieved in the whole of football, he would undoubtedly be number 1. But my number 8 spot is Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously we went into how good a player he was earlier, and I think for me the only reason why he's probably not higher on this list, again, it's a little bit, he was obviously in the Premier League for 6 years, which is a solid amount of time, but again, I would have just loved to have seen what he could have done in his peak years in the Premier League, and and had he stayed, there'd probably be no doubt in all of our minds that he would be number 1 on all of our lists. But his technical ability, his pace, is just every single attribute he had.
I mean, George, you say he was there for 6 years. Would you argue that he was only really world class for?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. 2000, that year, that 3 year period where Man United won the title, 2007, 8, 9. Ronaldo and obviously to a lesser, and obviously Rooney were the spearheads of that success. And he was still a good player in when he was a teenager, obviously. But yeah, after that 2006 World Cup, I think his level just absolutely. He was obviously arguably a world class player at that point anyway, but his level just went beyond what probably anyone could have imagined for him at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about guys got record international goals, like. He's scored over 100 international goals.
He could still go on until his 40s, to be honest with you.
He's still going strong. Great player. I mean, as you say, the only reason he didn't make my list was, again, the thing he probably wasn't here long enough. But if you look at ability alone, he would be definitely top.
Exactly,
probably.
Exactly. 100%
He's top
agree.
4 of all time, isn't he? Let's be
number 8,
about that.
Cristiano Ronaldo. And then now going into number 7, Frank Lampard I've gone with. So, we've alluded to, obviously, Lampard, Gerrard and Scholes quite a lot already on this podcast episode. But yeah, for me, what we've kind of covered before, the goals, the positional awareness, how outrageous he was for Chelsea. He popped up with important goals in the Champions League for them as well. Longevity as well. I still think it was a massive, massive mistake that Chelsea let him go when they did. And obviously he proved that because he signed for City that year and he had a very good season playing for them. He still scored goals, scored against Chelsea, which was really funny. And yeah, just, a proper all-round complete midfielder, Frank Lampard.
If 1 or 2 goats are 7, well, I'm excited to see the rest. Well, he wasn't in my list at all, but I deliberately left him out because for me, I felt that you two were going to have him, and I didn't want to get involved in that argument when I couldn't really have a great take on it. But also, do you think that we've got a similar sort of 2 titans clashing in this current generation of football? And who are they?
I would agree. Yeah,
Not
I'd
of
agree.
that level.
No, I don't think so. Which is great. It's just a representation of how good those two players were.
All right then, so we're moving into European football at this point. And number 6, I have gone with Wayne Rooney. Just unbelievable player, Wayne Rooney, of course. Quality, we obviously spoke about him earlier. I think that, he beat Bobby Charlton's Manchester United and his England goal scoring record as well. Just, a phenomenal footballer that all round could do everything. And during his peak was probably the best out and out striker in the world. The only thing that you can probably really throw against Rooney now, having thought about it a little bit, I mean, if we're going on hairlines, pretty atrocious. But it's probably the fact as well that he peaked very early, Wayne Rooney. He did that. That's obviously he was in the Premier League for a long time, but 2012 was probably the last really good year we got of Rooney. And the sort of 3-4 years that he spent after that, when he still wasn't that old either, he'd barely kind of hit 30 at that point. And you kind of think that he played so much football when he was younger. It would have been interesting to see that, if they'd maybe just eased him back into games a little bit, if he would have been able to, have a bit of a higher standard as he got a bit older, at least in terms of the Premier League.
You talk about his age there.
I think at best there's a year between them. I think at best there's a year between
and Ronaldo is still notching goals. So Ronaldo's notching goals still at Juventus in the Champions League, internationally.
It's not yet. They're not comparable.
Derby,
the levels are vast.
But the career has dipped, and he's had a year in America. He's not been the same player for a while, and I agree with
exactly.
You.
And
it's probably the thing you can throw at him. But he was so young when he came through. You think of his goal?
That was an unbelievable
against
goal.
Arsenal was. It was a great goal.
A little bit, because obviously, and the thing is as well, he was such a street footballer. He played like he was playing at the park all the time, and even though he still had the undeniable quality, when he became a number 10 and played in midfield, he was obviously missing that power and almost tenacity in his game that had been so common in his earlier years and had been such a big reason why he had been so successful. And obviously, if he'd been able to maintain that for say even maybe 3-4 years more than he did, he'd probably be a lot higher up on my list. He'd probably be knocking on that number 1 spot. That's really where I am with Rooney. So again, now I'm moving into very unlucky not to get Champions League football here, and it's going back to that old discussion again, and I feel like I'm constantly flip-flopping with these. But at number 5, Steven Gerrard for me.
More from an emotional, because I agree, from emotionally, he never won the league, but what he did.
A little bit. It was just.
Is that what carries it over for you?
It was just the fact that he was.
Is it more his ability?
Yeah. The thing is, Steven Gerrard was the complete midfielder. Let's pick as quite a lot of the midfielders have been in this list, but
absolutely, he's that good. He's that good. I don't think you could look at him and say you're not a decent midfielder.
But Steven Gerrard, he just he could ping any pass that he wanted to ping. He was so good on the ball. As you talk about his career, how early on in his career, box to box, he had legs for days, really, and he was always there in the big moments, of course, in his career. And again, you kind of think, had he played for or whatever, he'd have the titles to back it up, of course. But on this occasion, I've had Steven Gerrard coming out ahead of Frank Lampard for me. We've obviously spoken about him in length already, but incredible player. Making that Champions League football, I have gone with the highest Premier League goal scorer of all time, Alan Shearer, at number 4. So again, we've spoke about just the complete centre forward. Left foot, right foot, headers. Probably the most lethal finisher in terms of goal scorers that we've seen in the Premier League. You would never back him to miss. And if you had to have someone to score a goal to save your life, it would be Alan Shearer. And 260 Premier League goals. He had so many in the old Division 1 before that. Just an incredible player. Again, the only thing that you can really kind of throw at him is that he really should have won more in his career than just one Premier League title for Blackburn in 1995. He really should have come away at the end of his career with a ton of medals, and he would have done if he'd gone and played for Manchester United. Obviously he's made that argument of they would have won more medals if he'd played for them, and they probably would have done. You've got to think that things like the the Invincibles in 2004. Maybe if he was even still playing for Man United around 2005 or 6, you've got to wonder whether, Arsenal and Chelsea would have won those league titles those years if Alan Shearer had been playing for Man United. So for me, number 4. Going into number 3, I've gone with Dennis Bergkamp at number 3. Again, I don't know whether you guys think that's a bit high for Bergkamp. Personally, I just think the natural ability and talent of the man, and obviously the longevity of Arsenal, was just outrageous. He was such a good footballer, and he played at such, for such a long time. And as I said, he really kind of transcended the game in terms, he was obviously a big part of Arsene Wenger's, philosophy and moving into, more professionalism and stuff. It really sort of set the pace for where we are today in terms of player fitness and that kind of thing. And yeah, I think for me, as I said, that some of those goals that he scored for Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, I've already given my love for Dennis Bergkamp at this point, but yeah, you're right. He's just an unbelievable footballer. You can't ask for much more from a guy. He was just class all over the place, on, off the field. I mean, yeah, okay. Just a great player.
Runner-up,
deserves
and
to be right
again,
up there as one of the Premier League best.
I feel like I want to ask for your reactions to this first, just because we've already talked about this player already, and it's in terms of like non-West Ham players, it's one of my favourite players of all time. I've gone with a number 2, Paul Scholes. That's where I am on the Scholes-Gerrard Lampard debate for me. If you guys, I don't know if you guys think that's too generous or that's too high.
Look, Paul Scholes is a great player, and I said the point before, we could argue between us. Yeah. We think the best of those three.
For me, the thing about Scholes
never come to a verdict,
is just the way that he controls football games. Every player on the opposite, they look like puppets on a string, and his ability to just put a ball on a penny is just unbelievable. And I said it earlier, and I stand by that. I do think that they probably should have started Scholes in that 2011 League final, as much as he was aging by that point. And obviously, we're talking about a man that retired and then came back and hadn't looked like he'd missed a beat when he came back in 2013. Or 2012/13, it was that season. Just an unbelievable player. So yeah, that's my number 2. All right, my best.
I've got nothing to add to that.
Thierry Henry is number 1. I 100% agree with Simon. I just think, at least in terms of number 1 spot, anyway. Yeah, Thierry Henry was just next level. He's one of those players. I think as a kid, he was probably, when we played Arsenal, I probably feared him more than any other player on any other team. I just feel like you saw he was just such capable of such great goals, and the way that he carried the ball past players. He sat so many top quality players down on their arse. He sat them down like it was nothing. And yeah, I just, you look at his goals and assists for Arsenal in the time that he was there. Obviously, he had that fantastic comeback in 2012. Well, yeah, no, for me, my greatest player, I'm going Thierry Henry. Just a phenomenal footballer. And he's, in my opinion, the best player in Arsenal football history anyway. Yep, so we have in 10th spot, it was John Terry. In 9th, so Patrick Vieira.
Again then, 10
8th,
to 1.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Who's your list?
And then 7, Frank Lampard. Going into the league, we had Wayne Rooney at number 6, and then Steven Gerrard at number 5. And then my Champions League qualifiers were Alan Shearer at number 4, Bergkamp at number 3, Paul Scholes at number 2, and Thierry Henry to take the Premier League crown. That is our top 10.
Big.
That's the final whistle. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Midtable Up Podcast. If you enjoy our top 10 lists, please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Let us know what you would have done differently. If you watch this episode on YouTube, make sure to put your foot through that subscribe button and leave a like on the video, as well as follow us on Spotify and the Podcasts app to keep up to date with the series. Thank you very much. See you next time.